You're listening to Alcoholics Alive, where recovered members of Alcoholics Anonymous share their experience on how they live AA as a way of life. None of our participants get paid or speak for AA. Here are your hosts, Shank and Wayne. Let's open this meeting up with the we version of the Serenity Prayer. Oh, what is the we version of the Serenity Prayer? We're gonna have to add that to Meeting Shrapnel.
Maybe it can get super scrapped.
Super scrapped by Tammy. Yep. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I don't know what that is, but it's pretty crazy. Well, Shank, I think we when we decided to do traditions, we had some questions on whether we were going to lose listeners or not, because we didn't know if we had a lot of feedback wanting us to cover traditions, but our listenership is up, and we've gotten some good feedback. Now, we have had some haters about traditions, which is normal. What I would say to you, if you're out there listening right now, is if you really like Alcoholics Anonymous and you like the original message of Alcoholics Anonymous and you like the simple message that's in our book, you should want the traditions in place, because the traditions actually, if followed the way that they're written and intended, ensures that the simple Alcoholics Anonymous message is there for others to have and to get a hold of. So
there you go.
Yeah, follow the traditions, haters. Hey, our guest today is no stranger. I think it's his third or fourth time on our podcast, and we're glad to have him on today. Graham, what's going on, man?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing well.
Good to see you.
Yep, you guys too. Having a great time here in Zoom land, and happy to be on the podcast again.
Tell us a little bit about yourself for those that haven't heard you.
Okay.
You're from West Virginia, right?
Yeah, that's the accent, from West Virginia, via Scotland. So I am an alcoholic, and I got sober on October the 19th, 1997. I'm 51 years old. I got sober when I was 25. I started drinking when I was 13. Loved drinking. The first time I drank, I had a blackout. So I was walking around saying and doing things, and I can't remember what I was saying and doing. And they weren't nice things. They weren't constructive things that I was saying and doing to people. Anyway, so that went on for 12 years. This little circle I got caught in, feeling really bad sober, discovering that drinking will change that, taking the first drink, drinking far too much, having a blackout, doing and saying horrible things, waking up in the morning thinking, oh my God, what did I say? What did I do? That created bad feelings, and then we just go round the merry-go-round, round and round and round. And that was a process that for me took 12 years. And at the end of that process, I was so beaten down that I finally realized that this way of life was futile. It just was not going to produce the kind of life I wanted. So that happened on the floor of my apartment. I was crying, as usual, and after a big binge. And something happened, and I just realized I'm always going to be like this, no matter what I do, no matter where I go. And that was the day I got sober, and I didn't know that's what was happening. I've not had a serious desire to drink or do drugs since then. And I went to AA right after that, and I got really involved in AA. I fell in love with AA at the first meeting. Couldn't believe there was other people like me. I tried to hide my drinking and all the stuff I'd done, and these people were sitting talking about it, even laughing about it, some of them. And that's really what helped me. It was, I identified my alcoholism because people in AA talked about their active alcoholism. Oh my God, they talked about drinking. And that's what I identified with. I did not identify with steps in God. I identified with you talking about your drinking and what happened when you drank. That's what saved my life. And then after that, I guess I was open to the message of the steps. My first sponsor took me through the steps in about 2 or 3 months. He's still sober today, so am I. And I think after I did the steps, the big thing that changed, although I didn't know it at the time, was I knew the truth about alcohol. I'd been restored to sanity about the first drink. I can't drink no matter what happens because I'm an alcoholic. And alcoholics like me just can't drink. We can't ever drink safely, not even one drink. And that's really the big change. So I was still all those things that sober, that I'd always been sober, which was a liar, a cheat, a rationalizer, on and on and on. But I was clear about alcohol. And that's really what the steps did initially. So I've been sober a long time now. Life's had its ups and downs. And, I just keep going to AA. I love my home group. And we are really into message meetings right now. So, on Friday, I went to the Psych Center with another guy in the home group who's 50 years sober, and he's still taking meetings into the Psych Center. His name's Gary. Him and I went together.
Nice.
I picked him up and he was like, I've got a GPS, but he's trying to give me directions, What's that? I'm like, dude, I've got a GPS, but I just listened. I was nice. I was
Let
like,
him,
okay.
yeah.
That's my sponsor every Wednesday night.
It's a left up here. Okay, Gary, thanks. And then on Saturday morning, we went to the Navy SARP rehab program. Me and a guy, a sponsor, we did a meeting in there. So that's what I really like, is doing that kind of thing. Just keep doing that no matter what happens. So I have a good life today. I'm reasonably happy most of the time. And when problems come, a lot of times I create them, usually because people don't do what I want. I get mad. But I've got a group of people that are sober, who are on the same path as me, and I'm able to talk to them honestly without fear of judgment, and just get right again. So I'm glad to be here, guys. I really love AA. It saved my life. And my plan is to just keep going no matter what happens.
All right.
Thanks, Graham. If you all would like to hear more from Graham, we've had him on season 1, episode 8, and season 3, episode 11. So if you haven't checked those out, check them out.
Check them out. Check them out. Thanks, Graham. Shank, what's our topic today?
Our topic today is Tradition 11.
Ooh.
So we have Tradition 11 in the long form, which was written before the short form. And it says, our relations with the general public should be characterized by personal anonymity. We think AA ought to avoid sensational advertising. Our names and pictures as AA members ought not be broadcast, filmed, or publicly printed. Our public relations should be guided by the principle of attraction rather than promotion. There is never need to praise ourselves. We feel it better to let our friends recommend us. And then the short form says, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. So question number 1 for you guys is, do I sometimes promote AA so fanatically that I make it seem unattractive? What do you think, Graham?
Hold on a minute. Is this a traditions meeting? I'm not sure. I'm kind of busy. Did you guys tell me this was the 11th tradition? I thought it was the 11th step.
We tricked you.
We tricked you.
So, no, I'm only joking. There's a meeting I go to on Sunday, and the last Sunday of the month they do a traditions meeting, and the attendance is notably lighter.
Yes.
But anyway, so fanatically promoting AA that turns people off. Yeah, definitely when I first came to AA, and especially my first sponsor he didn't really use the big book much. He knew the big book, but he didn't really show me in the big book very much at all. But he took me through the steps. I was an atheist, so I think he tried to keep me away from the book because it says God a lot in there, and he didn't want me to run off and miss getting sober. So but the next sponsor I had was a big book sponsor, and he was really into the big book, and I learned a lot from him. But what happened to me was at that stage in my recovery, my ego was had really come back big time. I was maybe a year or two sober, and now I've got this knowledge. I have a mind that's good at retaining things. I've also got a mind that almost killed me, when I was
Yeah.
drinking. But the mind is good. My mind is good at retaining things. I can read things and I kind of remember them pretty well. So I read this book, and then the next thing you know, I'm Mr. AA. I know better than everybody in AA, and I'm running around to meetings with the book under my arm, pointing at people. You're not doing the program right, and setting people straight in meetings. That was my favorite, and getting really, really angry. So that was not attractive, I don't believe. I think it attracted some other really sick people. And, some of them got help, I guess, and some of them didn't. But yeah, I was very aggressive about this is the way you have to do it, and there's only one way to do it. So what really, and I think I did turn some people away from AA and definitely away from my home group when I behaved like that. I really didn't know I was behaving like that. I thought I was right, and that people in AA had screwed up and they'd lost the true AA, and I needed to help them get back on track.
That's right. Yeah.
So I really, really did believe that. I despised people with 20 years sober and stuff. They just seemed like they didn't really care. They didn't really care about the new people.
Yeah.
And the thing that changed me, this is strange. So when I was about 12 years sober, my second child was born, and we took him home. And then at 3 days of life, he had all these seizures and blood was coming out his mouth. And we rushed him to the hospital, and he'd been brain damaged, and they told us he might be in a vegetative state for the rest of his life. And I was there in the hospital with my wife. It was like a nightmare. They saved his life, but he had all this brain damage and epilepsy. And what happened was a whole bunch of people from AA, a lot of whom at this time I was judging because they weren't doing AA properly. They were staying sober, but they weren't really doing AA according to my ego. They all started coming up to the hospital and supporting my wife and I, and bringing food up and hugging us and texting and calling and, going to our house and cleaning, just doing everything that they could to support us. And, I went through that experience. The people from the church who I'd been very dismissive of, they came up and, were trying to help us and praying for us and all that. A lot of people really helped us. And when I came away from that experience, I don't know why, but something in me had shifted. And I just seemed to not be like that anymore. The angry big book guy was gone. I just wasn't that guy anymore. I can't explain it. I didn't decide to change. I didn't decide to be nicer. I didn't decide to drop that persona, but it just was gone. Almost entirely. And I've not really behaved like that since then. So that's my experience of that. But I do know a lot of guys. There's a group in our area, and they're doing that. They pride themselves on using bad language in AA meetings. So they'll come into your home group and they'll start cussing up a storm, but they're talking about God and AA while they're doing it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I see them, and I see them helping some people, but also turning a lot of people off and making a lot of people very resentful. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. When Graham acted like he was surprised about the topic being Tradition 11, it made me think about my very first meeting that I went to that was on traditions. It was not my home group, but it was a group that I went to every week. And I walked in there one night, and people were talking before the meeting. And I'm like, well, I wonder what the topic is tonight. And I'll never forget this. It was Tradition 2. I think that's right. It was a tradition for sure. And I'm like, a tradition? They're going to actually study a tradition? Now, I'm only sober probably, 45, 60 days. And I had heard things about traditions being politics and bureaucracy, and it's for the group, not for people. And I left. I got up and left and went to another group where they were going to let me, cry about an open discussion meeting where they were going to let me cry about my wife sleeping with my cousin and not coming back and stuff like that. And oh man, I was so far off track. I had a similar experience to Graham when I first got sober. I I don't remember being real, you hear people talking about shouting from the rooftops that they're sober and about AA. I didn't do that. I was sober about 6 or 7 years and got big into the big book and became an expert. And for probably from 6 or 7 years sober to about 13 years sober, I preached a little bit, and I especially would go into like prison meetings or detoxes and just tell people, my God, this is the answer. You've got to do this. Doesn't matter what they've told you or what else you've got going on. This is the solution. And looking back on it, it was probably unattractive to some people. And I would do that somewhat in meetings. But as a rule, I'm not a guy that has gone like out in public and shouted from the rooftops or you know, I may have done it with my family when I first got sober, telling them that they needed to get on with this brand of spirituality. uh,
Well, I think
what's the,
both of you bring up some good points um, about uh, anonymity. So I have the same experience basically with both of you. I was probably more fanatical than both of you all have described, but I was incarcerated. And so none of those women have stayed sober. When they come back around, we'll have them on this podcast so they can tell you exactly how I was trying to get every single person in that prison sober off of something. Um, and also, I had my brand of AA and I was being told it was the right brand and help all these people. And this is your sponsorship family and blah, blah, blah. And I stayed sober through all of that. Like no one said you're an idiot. Now, people
right?
did kindly say, well, hey, Susie, when I was getting sober and da 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 da, like they very kindly explained things to me. I wasn't hearing it. And I was like, oh, that's so nice. They've been sober 25 years. Wow. I mean, they still don't have it like I do. Um, but both of you all bring up a good point, Graham, when you were in the hospital with your child and Jerry going into facilities, if we're anonymous among each other, then how would those people know how to find you when they got out of the prison, the hospital, wherever? Or how would they know where to come visit you at the hospital? Because I know that I had a problem with that for years where I did not want anyone to know really that I was an alcoholic or I was in AA or I was recovered or recovering. It kind of comes into our second question here too. Like, am I ashamed of being a recovered or recovering alcoholic? Um, but I think that's interesting. Both of your stories kind of tie into anonymity in that way,
Hmm.
where I thought for years anonymity meant I could not tell anyone I was in AA. My family knew, but they kind of knew because I was incarcerated and the AA members were going in with us. I tried to get everyone to do Al-Anon. My dad did for a while. Um, but for years, the anonymity piece of this was like more problematic for me um, than any of it.
Gravel House, you got any experience with being ashamed of being recovered or recovering?
That's an interesting question. What comes to mind is in one piece of AA literature, I can't put my finger on it. Bill Wilson says we should respect the right of everyone to have their anonymity at a level that they want, that they're comfortable with. So, yeah, so other people's anonymity, I think I need to be very careful about that. I've had some experiences with, I'm in a restaurant with my wife celebrating our anniversary. Turns out the waiter is a new guy in AA. Comes up to the table, he recognizes me, and then he proceeds to do a mini fifth step at the table in front of my wife. I had to ask him to leave eventually. Another time, I'm in a Panera Bread with a lady from work who doesn't know I'm in EA, and this person comes up, "Are you going to the meeting tonight?" All that. Very, very embarrassing and awkward. So I need to, if I see someone outside and they're in EA and I'm in EA, I'm just going to keep walking. Unless, like, it's just the two of us on the street, but if they're with other people, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to keep moving. If they say hello, I'll respond, but I'm not going to break people's anonymity. So that's one thing. As far as me being ashamed of being sober, no, definitely my family, no. My family weren't happy that I went to AA. I have a family that is very unsupportive in general. That's just the way they roll. And when I said I was in AA, they were horrified. You know, you're not an alcoholic. AA doesn't work anyway, on and on and on. And so I didn't try and force it on them. I did make amends to them, of course. But with them, I openly say, you know, I'm going to go to a meeting. And they're like, oh, and off I go. Most of our friends, I would say, know that I'm in AA. You know, people that are not in AA, that my wife and I are friends with, they know I'm in AA. But at work, in my employment, I've never really found the need to come out and make a statement, you know, maybe at the job interview. Oh, by the way, I'm actually an alcoholic. But I'm sober, so as long as I go to meetings, I should be okay, you know, and practice AA. So I've not done that. I don't really think it's relevant to what I do. I sell things for a living, and I don't really take that into work with me. When and if I see people at work who are struggling with their drinking, I'm definitely open to explaining to them why I can't drink and pointing them towards some help. But I'm not running around telling everybody that. I once sponsored this guy who was a kindergarten teacher at public school, and he'd been in the same school for 25 years. He got very publicly sent to rehab because he was drunk on the job. And he came back. Everyone in that school knew he'd been to rehab, all the adults. And the parents all found out and everything. And you know what? Over the years, many people have come to him and talked to him. You know, my sister's really struggling with her drinking, parents and staff there. So he's actually been able to be an example and help a lot of people in that community. But that's not been my experience up to this point. So I'm not saying I would never do that. I feel like the industry I'm in, it's not relevant. And I also think, to be honest with you, it could be seen as a negative toward me having that job and doing that job. It could be a concern for the employer. So but I go back to what I started with. I think it depends on everybody's situation. And I think people have the right to maintain their anonymity at a level that they want to maintain it at. And, you know, I'm on the 12-step list. My number's on there. And I'm happy to give my number out to people when I meet them in AA. But mostly the people that know I'm an alcoholic would be other people in Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah. Yeah, when I got sober, it was a step up for me. So it was like it was an upgrade from how I was living, and anyone that was associated with me or around me saw that as an upgrade, and I'm I'm actually pretty grateful. I had mostly a supportive family when I first got sober, so I mean I was never ashamed of it. I found it awkward sometimes having conversations with people about how do you explain to them, that you don't drink and that you're in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was told, the easiest way to ease into that is just say you're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. That starts a different conversation than saying that, oh, I'm an alcoholic. Or the favorite one is I go to meetings. Like, we're supposed to know what everybody knows what that means, but I so I mean, I think you're right, Graham, that it's up to each individual what they want to do. But for me, I don't know, everyone like just organically found out. It's like, I don't know, it was interesting. And I mean, I was always kind of instructed or suggested that people around you and your family and friends and even your employer should probably at some point know that you're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think that, we don't go out and just start telling people that. For me, it always just kind of happened organically through just conversations. And an easy way it happened for me at work was like people would ask me, like, well, where'd you do this weekend? Or why aren't you going to the Christmas party, tonight? Or whatever it was. And then instead of lying and saying, well, I got a church function, I would just tell them that I've got an obligation at an Alcoholics Anonymous event. And then that would start, for me, always a very positive conversation. Always. It's never like come back to hurt me or somebody like looking at me weird, or, well, they'll look at you weird, but they won't treat you any differently. Matter of fact, there's actually, in most cases, a level of respect that I've actually gotten from people when they find out that I'm actually an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous and I'm trying to help people. I don't, I don't think it was ever meant for us. And you can read a lot of the earlier writings on it. The 11th tradition was never meant for us to like hide out or to not be willing, I guess, to let people know we're recovered members of the program. And I'll tell you, like the very first job I had, I was there for a long time, and it started as a small company, and it ended up being a huge company that most people use their products. I actually became like a resource for their HR department to actually talk to people and folks that needed help. So that was that's kind of my experience with that.
Well, what I think is interesting too, I've recently had an experience, I work in customer service essentially, but I know a lot about my clients, and they share so many things with me. And over the years, like when people would bring me wine for Christmas, at first I would just be like revolted, because I was kind of, I don't know, I feel like I was told in a way that like, don't even have it in the room with you. And even though I didn't
Yeah.
necessarily feel that way, like when I got sober for years, I lived in a house with family that there was alcohol, there were people who were hard drinkers, partying, whatever, and it was never an issue or a temptation for me. And then it got to the point where I would share, over the years, like, oh, well, I don't drink. And the majority of my clients forget that before the next Christmas. You know why? Because they're not alcoholics and they don't care. But there have been people over time. Recently I had a client, and his husband has been having trouble having seizures, having, from how they described it, I was like, he's withdrawing. I didn't say that to them necessarily, but it got to the point where over a few months, I was able to say, hey, if he needs help, I'm a recovered member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Like, I'd be happy to explain what that is and go to a meeting, or, open meetings, closed meetings, whatever. What's interesting, I was kind of telling Jerry about that before we got on here, but what's interesting is I've had these clients for years and years and years. And one of them was like, oh my gosh, well, I've never seen you post anything on Instagram about it. And I was like, because I don't.
That's good.
And so it kind of opened this other conversation where, I got to kind of explain to him a little bit more. I don't have to go into depth about AA and what it is and what it's not. But of course, his concern for his husband was like, oh, then it's going to be this whole thing that the whole world's going to know about. And we're going to have to post about it and do all this stuff online, which I think, in here, it says in the long form, not be broadcast, filmed, or publicly printed, which for me, I would say that the internet, Facebook, Instagram, anything that my name is tied to, that would be publicly printed. So it was just an interesting conversation to have, where I was like, you know what? Actually, I've never done that. I was too scared with my first sponsor, even though maybe I kind of wanted to. I wanted to get back at the people that had told everyone what I had done. I mean, like, take that. I've been sober for X amount of time. But it I was too scared in that moment. And then by the time I thought maybe I'd do it, I knew better. So I do think that that is interesting, and people like to kind of fuss and argue about it in meetings, whether or not that's press, radio, and films.
Well, it is. And the thing about the Levin tradition, it was really put in place to protect the fellowship from us.
Hmm.
It was never really meant for us to protect ourselves, even though, I mean, that's there. So it was meant for us. What's our relationship with the public? And we want to make sure we don't have any self-proclaimed messiahs or spokespeople for the fellowship. And it was meant to not, so people just didn't go out publicly and say, "Hey, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and I'm speaking for Alcoholics Anonymous."
Well, and when people did, I mean, at GSO, they have these huge scrapbooks of all of these articles that were printed in newspapers. And it is the craziest thing to
Yeah.
even thumb through. I mean, some of the stuff that they're saying in those articles, I'm just like, this is so cringe. Like, oh my God. My family, similar to yours, Graham, several of them are just like, you don't need that. You're not an alcoholic, whatever. Like, that's dumb. They don't care about it. But like, I can only imagine if they were reading some of the things that were printed back then, like in the newspaper, and they would be like, Susie, absolutely not.
Yeah. So now people are doing it on Facebook and Instagram. So I
Hmm.
think to answer your question, if I went out on Facebook today on my personal page, posted my medallion with the steps and the traditions in the back and say,
Hmm.
"Look at me, I've been sober such and such time." Actually, it's, I guess, what, 34 years. I don't mind saying it. And come on, guys, get on board.
Hmm.
I mean, that's definitely what this tradition is asking us not to do. Yeah, even just posting a medallion. Oh, 3 years of sobriety. It's number one, it says we're not supposed to praise ourselves. And number two, it says we're supposed to be anonymous at the level of press, radio, TV, and films. And I think some of the new literature from GSO actually includes internet and social media because it's a public domain. And it could imply that I'm speaking for Alcoholics Anonymous.
Something else, like as I was working with someone recently, is like I feel neutral about alcohol. I also feel neutral about my sobriety at this point. Like I don't feel like I'm
Yeah,
better than everyone else or like I've got a better hand. There are things that people do that I'm like, I wouldn't do that. But, I don't feel fearful. It's not fear-based sobriety. I don't think that like I could just drink at any moment. I'm not naive enough to think that I'm never going to drink again if I don't continue to do certain things. Um, but like I don't feel ashamed. I don't feel proud necessarily, I'm just like I'm a member of society in good standing, I would think at this point.
yeah. What's the
Yeah.
third question? Gravel House, you gonna say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and I think I recall there was in the early AA there was a famous baseball player,
Yes, those are the
and
articles, Graham.
he came out and said, "I'm sober in Alcoholics Anonymous," and then I think he got drunk again.
Yep.
Yes,
So
that's
so that was also a concern of the early members, was that it would be bad publicity because we really don't know what's going to happen, and
yeah,
especially for people in AA to make claims about AA. And then the other angle that I see a lot of people doing is they try to use AA to benefit themselves,
that's right.
particularly in a legal setting. So what they'll
Mhm.
do is they slap the old lady around, or they got their third DUI, and then the first thing the lawyer says is, "You need to go to AA because that'll look good for the judge." And then they
Yeah,
come to AA and they play the AA, they dance the AA dance, and then once court's over, woohoo! And the judge is like, I see you've been to 500 AA meetings. That's really, really, that's really a great thing. And I can see that you've changed. So I'm just going to let you away with it. And then the guy's
yeah,
like, yes. And I've also had people ask me to write them letters to take
yes,
to the judge to tell the judge how good they are now. And a lot of these people, I don't even know them. And I'm
yeah.
like, no, I'm not doing that. So if it was someone I'd known for years and they were good standing in AA, maybe. But that's what I've seen a lot. So this is all, I think, to do with anonymity. It's me, my ego, trying to use my
That's
membership
right.
of AA to benefit me somehow.
Yeah.
That was not my experience. Oh, Our next question is my AA sobriety attractive enough that a sick drunk would want such a quality for himself?
I mean,
Just-
I don't know. I like we were talking about earlier, there's been a shift that I'm becoming aware of away from in-person meetings towards online meetings. And this question's great because that's one of the concerns that I have. Really, if I look at how I stay sober and why I stayed sober and continue to come to AA, a huge part of that is my interactions, my in-person interactions with people in AA, in my home group, at the business meeting, at the home group meeting, seeing the same people week after week, help set up, help break down. We always go out for dinner after the meeting. It's the meeting after the meeting. It's very important. We invite everybody to come with us. So I feel like I don't know how people would really be, and another thing is like, sometimes I'll invite like the home group over to my home. Like one of our guys is a submariner and he's going to deploy soon. So we'll have like a barbecue at my house and everybody will come over. So people can see more. I mean, they can see kind of how I live. And I guess they can judge that in whatever way they want. It's none of my business. But, I think what they see is a reasonably nice house, someone that's got a job, someone that's got a stable marriage, someone that's raised two kids without yelling at my spouse and going crazy all the time. I think they get that. There's a calmness. And how can I get that off a Zoom meeting? If I'm just seeing your head in a box, like
Yeah.
once a week, how do I know what you're actually like? Do you not think it's easy just to, I mean, we're all actors, you know, we all we all have a persona that we like to project. And I find it
Yeah.
very interesting that I think it's much easier to do that online than it is
Yeah.
to do in person when you're sitting eye to eye with people and people actually get to know you. And that's a fear of mine. So am I think what I've got is what I've got, or what my life's like is what my life's like. I attribute it to me finding AA and AA finding me in a relationship with a power greater than me that came to me as a result of being in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I attribute my life as it is now to that. There's no doubt in my mind if I was drinking and drugging like I used to, my life would not be like this. And
Yep.
my life, I think, has got better as the years have gone by. And I think my personality has continued to change overall for the better as the years have gone by. So if people don't want that, I guess that's fine. But I'm not one of those crazy guys in AA. I'm not going to open my share by saying, I'm crazy. No, I don't want to be crazy. I want to be like a productive member of society. I want to be someone that, has changed, has had a dramatic change and continues to change as a result of being in Alcoholics Anonymous, continues to mature, continues to be able to progressively handle difficult situations with some grace and dignity, continues to get better at dealing with people that, quite frankly, I don't like, who rub me the wrong way, and offer them some grace as well, like I have been offered so many times. So, sometimes guys ask me to sponsor them. A sponsor I had one time, he said two things so well. He said, I have a 100% success rate with sponsoring people. I stayed sober. And then this other guy, he said to me, Graham, in the sponsorship game, you have to kiss a lot of frogs. And that is exactly right, in terms of people doing the program. And that's okay. But I need to remember that the main beneficiary of the interaction often may be me. And I get to stay sober and realize what a fortunate person I am.
Yeah. So I guess this question ties right into that short form of the tradition, right? Traction rather than promotion.
Mm-hmm.
As Graham was talking, I was wondering, I wonder if our lives look so attractive to some of the new people that it scares them. and uh, to where like, oh man, I could never. 'Cause I used to go to this church before I got sober, and I never thought I could live up to those people's expectations. They didn't put any on me.
Mhm.
It was just in my mind that there's no way I could ever be like that or live like that. And, you know, I actually ended up living like that and being like that. But, um,
I think I kind of had the opposite experience where I owed the state of North Carolina so much money and an insurance company, and I had probation and parole and all of these things where I was taught through AA and sponsorship that like I should pay all those off. And, so I drove an old car for years that I loved, and I lived in a studio apartment, and I was able to open a business, and people would just kind of look at me sideways, like, why do you still live in that studio apartment and drive that old car? Like, shouldn't your life look better by now? And, I was paying things off and trying to live by principles and all that kind of stuff with money. And so I think like it kind of people would look at me like, well, what is wrong with you? Like, what is going on here? Buy a new freaking car. When in reality, like I could have, but I was trying to do things in the order that they were given to me or that the consequences racked up. So maybe that is why so many people ask me to sponsor them because they're like, well, she's still out here in the trenches because over the last, I don't know, year or so, as I have been able to kind of things do look better now for me, the outside looking in. I'm still the same person, I'm still growing spiritually, but from the outside looking in, they probably do look bad. I don't drive that super old car anymore. I miss it sometimes, but things look different for me. And so maybe that is why not as many newer people, they're like, whoa, maybe she has it together.
maybe Shank, but probably not.
Yeah,
I,
I mean, I think in my case, I didn't have a car for the first two
yeah.
years I was sober. I had a bicycle. And this one guy called James, he used to take me to meetings twice a week. He would drive to my house, which was out
Mm.
his way, and he would take me to the meeting and he would drive me home. And I took all that for granted, of course, but he did that.
Hmm.
And the material things really only came, I would say, within the last 5 years or so. Because, when you've got two kids in daycare and a mortgage and all that stuff, and at the start of your career, you don't make as much money as you do at the end, usually. So I found like I didn't really have any money. And, that was kind of our experience. But I guess as I've gotten older and my wife's gotten older, we've kind of moved up, I guess, in the corporations or whatever, which tends to happen over time. Uh, but I'm with you. I think what Jerry said and what you said too, Susie, could be right. Is two ends of it. Your life might be such a way that people are like, oh well, he doesn't know what it's like. Look at him in his
That
fancy car or whatever. I don't have a fancy car, but look at him in his big car or whatever. Look at his clothes. He's not like me. He doesn't understand. Or it could be the other way where people are looking down and saying, well, but I need to remember this is not Joel Osteen. This is not the prosperity gospel,
that's right.
just pray
Yeah.
and God's
Hmm.
going to shower me with money. That's why
That's
people
right.
like the 9 step promises. They think they're going to get cash from God.
Mm.
So, that's not what this is about. And it says, I'm sure in the 12 and 12, some people have had bad financial reversals since they came into AA. I met a guy 35 years sober, lost everything,
Hmm.
like his house, everything, lost it all at 20 years sober. And I've met other people that have become very, very wealthy since they got sober. So,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's really, but I see for newcomers, that might be a big thing. Oh, he's got a Mercedes. Whoa. And this guy's got a 14-year-old minivan. Which one is the better sponsor?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't think of it. I mean, I know everybody's different. People probably looked at material stuff. I always was impressed by people that were just willing to help me and that were willing I mean, they were just very different in their approach towards life and their, for the most part, lack of judgment of people and
Mhm.
their ability to to just kind of go with the flow and accept things and not try to meddle into everything. I mean, that stuff was super attractive to me.
Yeah.
Because it was opposite of how I lived, and there was kind of a peace and a serenity to a lot of folks that personally was attractive to me. So I guess if I answered the question, I would say that I probably do try to live that way. I think I always go back to, I know it looks like this doesn't apply anymore, but the power of example is the best thing we have. I mean, I mean, people can act like that's not the answer, but if you want to help somebody, set a good example by how you live. And I mean, I think that's the essence of the tradition, of this tradition, is how are you living? Shank, that probably takes us right to meeting shrapnel.
It sure does.
What do we got?
You ready, Gravel House?
I'm ready.
Oh, he's ready. He's a shrapnel king.
All right. Our meeting shrapnel, which is our segment of lore, myth, and sayings frequently heard in AA. One of our guests, Graham, brought a super scrap.
Yep. Tammy.
Tammy brought the super scrap into the fold here. So if something is just so egregious, then
So
you can
hold on,
super
Shank.
scrap
Are
it.
we giving him a super scrap option?
We're giving Graham the option. He is a
Okay.
returning guest. Tammy was a returning guest.
So Graham, the super scrap can override the overall vote if you've got it.
It's like
All right.
a veto or a tiebreaker.
Yeah.
Okay.
So our first meeting shrapnel is I'm recovering out loud.
Wow.
Ties into the tradition, doesn't it?
Yeah. So, just a lot of pride there, a lot of ego. Look at me. Look at me. I'm sober now. And, I'm doing really good. I'm good now, And I'm just going to show everybody I'm not ashamed, and I'm going to be loud and proud. Just let everybody know I'm an alcoholic. So this is usually heard from people that are not effectively sponsored and who are not in a structured home group. Often at open discussion meetings, you'll hear this kind of thing. People will say things like, it's a talking illness. I've heard that a lot. Yeah.
What? I don't think I've
Yeah, it's
ever heard that.
it's a talking illness. So that means you just talk a lot at an open discussion meeting about how you feel, right? So it's a similar kind of thing. And I think it does have implications for people's anonymity, breaking anonymity and so forth. And then also maybe bringing AA into disrepute when you relapse and people start to think, oh, AA doesn't work. Look at that guy,
Yep.
But I think at its core, it's really a vulgar display of ego. And it's really the antithesis of what we're supposed to be, of what we're asked to do in AA. I remember my sponsor, Lance, and I was making amends. And you know what Lance said to me? He said, listen, your mom and dad don't need to believe you're an alcoholic. Hell, they don't even need to know that you're an alcoholic. What your mom and dad want is a son. So why don't you shut up about being an alcoholic and start acting like a son? And I was like, whoa. And I was like, well, I don't know what to do. He said, well, your brother-in-law, the one that you resent, he behaves. How does he behave? And I'm like, well, he's very steady and stable and he's nice to everyone. And, he goes to all the family functions and behaves very well. And he said, well, just do what he does. So, that's the opposite of loud and proud. It's like, shut up and show me through your actions. Don't tell me through your words. You have to watch the alcoholic's feet, not listen to what they're saying. So I'm sitting in a meeting and I'm going on and on about how much I know about AA and recovery. Oh, but I haven't been at a meeting for 2 months. I just came by to pick up my chip.
That's right.
And then after I share, I'll leave the meeting.
That's right. Yep.
Wow. Okay. Thanks for sharing, buddy. So that's kind of my take on that. I think it's nonsense. Absolute nonsense.
How about
Yeah,
you,
I
Jay
agree.
Wayne?
Oh, I completely agree. This is, we didn't, there's a lot on Tradition 11 we didn't cover because of time, but you hear this a lot in with celebrities and so-called sober influencers, and it came out of that book, The Anonymous People. You know, that, hey, screw traditions, we're just going to recover out loud. And it's all part of that. We talked about it before we recorded, that sober lifestyle, recovery community type living. Sober is sexy, no matter what. That, you know, so it's not a, you know, again, set a quiet, positive example by how you live. Yeah, that speaks louder than recovering out loud. So for me, it's trash.
I agree. I can't add anything more to that. You all covered it. Do you want to
All
keep it or scrap it?
Hold on, before we do that, I just remembered. It says in the book, 10 or 20 years of drunkenness would make a skeptic out of anyone. For most families who've lived with an alcoholic, seeing is believing.
That's
and
right.
I think that captures what we're trying to say here.
That's right.
Sorry.
So what are you going to do, Graham? Keep or scrap?
Scrap it. Anybody that says this doesn't get to share at the meeting.
All right.
Nice.
I'm scrapping it. Shank?
All right. I'm scrapping it. It's out of here.
All right.
Next, we have grateful recovering alcoholic. As in, hi, I'm Susie and I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic.
Oh, hi, Susie.
Oh my God. This is right up there with I'm blessed. Yeah? Okay, so you're blessed, but my kid got brain damage and my life's a freaking nightmare now because he's having seizures all the time. So I'm
Yep.
not blessed. So God loves you and he doesn't love me. I'm getting punished because I'm badder than you. Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Let's go outside and we'll see how blessed you are. I'm just like, wow, that is nothing to do with Alcoholics Anonymous. That is my ego telling everybody, look at me, I'm so good, that God favors me now. I find that actually disgusting that people are saying that in AA. And there's people in that room that are dying of alcoholism, they can't stay sober. And this idiot's sitting there saying, yeah, I'm blessed. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. It's like, geez, every time I hear someone I sponsor, it's usually when they're around 3 to 6 months sober, and they've heard this in a meeting and they think it sounds good, and they're like, you know, at first I didn't like being an alcoholic, but now I'm really grateful that I'm an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to get the guy and like throw him out the window. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, what are you even talking about? Just stop it. Stop it, stop it, stop it. So this is another example of people in AA trying to say they're better and different than everybody else. Because if I'm just an alcoholic, I'm not a grateful alcoholic like you, Susie. So you're better than me because you're so zen and so serene and so connected hand in hand with God that you're actually grateful all the time. Oh, beautiful. I'm not a grateful alcoholic. I'm a mean alcoholic. I'm a resentful alcoholic. I'm a very selfish dude. I'm dishonest. And that's why I need to keep coming to you and I need this help that you guys offer me, you know. So
That's right.
this makes me sick. I don't want to keep going on. I need to stop now, but it really does. It makes me like, you know what? Just or another one I hate is I'm a real alcoholic. It's like, what? So if I'm a real alcoholic, I'm better than you and I'm better than him.
That's
Because
right.
you guys are just alcoholics. I'm a real alcoholic.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm afraid to say anything. I'm afraid old Gravel House is going to come take me down to the parking lot. Man. Hey, listen, this one, I told Shank before earlier today that there was a very small period of time when I was newly sober that I introduced myself as a grateful alcoholic. And that's all I said was grateful alcoholic. And this is the truth. Looking back on it, I was quickly told, hey, in AA, just be an alcoholic. You don't need to be grateful alcoholic. You don't need to be recovering alcoholic. You don't need to be recovered alcoholic. You don't need to be alcoholic and a drug addict. You don't need to be an alcoholic and a bedwetter or whatever it is. I was all of those. Just be an alcoholic. And it does tie right into the tradition and what you said, Gravel House, because I was trying to be different. And I was trying to show people, man, look at how great I'm doing. And it doesn't feel like that or sound like that when you're doing it, but that's what it was. And I was basically separating myself from other people by just trying to be different. And so to me, it's one of the worst ones for me. It's awful. When I hear people say it, it just drives me crazy. Man, I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. My problem is Jimmy. Right? You ever heard that one? My problem is Jerry.
All the time.
So, yeah, I think it's dumb. Shank,
Well,
you said it.
no, I've never said this, but I've had a similar experience, I think, as Graham in terms of feeling like, I don't know, maybe like I wasn't doing AA the right way because other people didn't have to go to prison, and they talk about they came into AA and they were praying and they did this and that. And reality is, like, maybe they got cut a break, maybe their family had money. I don't know. This one for me, it seems like the people I don't know that I hear say it, I'm just like, why?
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 Yeah.
You know, why?
Well, because I'm just a garden variety drunk.
I think we could replace the word grateful with the word smug.
So what do you want to do? You want to keep it or scrap it, Graham?
We get rid of it. Banished.
I thought he was going to throw the super scrap
I
out.
thought he was going to throw the super scrap down on it.
I'm scrapping it. Shank.
All right, it's out of here. So our last meeting shrapnel for today is just another bozo on the bus.
Graham, I'm an alcoholic and I'm just another bozo on the bus. I mean, I don't even know what to say about this. It's so I think really what I see in my mind is that it's like my behavior is really nothing to do with me. You know, even when I'm sober now, it's really nothing to do with me. I'm just like a bozo. I'm just sitting like a mumbling idiot on a bus, and I don't even know what's going on. I'm not responsible for anything. You know, I don't need to get a job. I want to get disability. You know, I don't need to, make amends or do any of that stuff. I'm just a bozo on the bus. I'm just having a good time, baby, And what, can I get your number? What are you doing after the meeting? It's that kind of nonsense. It's like, what this guy told me one time, he was my sponsor, and he said, cool people don't recover. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, if you want to be, A is not for people that are cool. Yep. If you want to be cool, alcohol and drugs is for people trying to be cool, trying to have this image. A is for people that are not cool. We failed. I failed. I failed at all of that, trying to be cool, trying to be tough, trying to be one of the guys. It didn't work. I was a mess. So this is part of that for me. It's like, oh, it's all good, man. Oh, I'm chilled out, man. Hey, bro. They call you man and bro all the time. Yeah. And it's just, I guess it's a sickness. I'm trying not to ridicule people that say that because I think they're really sick. And I think if you go to certain AA meetings, there's a lot of bozos on the bus, and you're all on the bus together, and the bus is headed right back to the liquor store.
I know that I had heard this in AA before, but I was reading a book when I was, 5 years sober, probably maybe 6, and there was a quote in this book. Now, it was like a self-helpy type book, okay? And I looked it up, and it says, we're all bozos on the bus, so we might as well sit back and enjoy the ride. And that is from clown activist Wavy Gravy, who is best known for a role that he played in 1969 when he was the master of ceremonies at Woodstock.
Woodstock, yeah.
So I remember seeing that in that book and being like, wait a minute. Like, hang on. I'm really confused. I thought there wasn't crossover between AA and other things. And, at this point in time, I was believing when someone had 10, 20, 30 years of sobriety, I'm like, everything they say is AA and that is the law and that's how it goes. Bozo on the bus? Okay, fine. But I remember when I read that, I was like, wait a minute. Hang on. This doesn't sound right.
Yeah. We had a guy say this at our home group recently. So Graham, I was hip, slipping cool when I first got sober too. And my sponsor, I'll never forget it. He said, "You know what the definition of cool is, don't you?" I said, "What?" He said, "Not so hot." There's some more shrapnel for you. I think people, when they say this, they're trying to come across as humble and
one among many.
Yeah, one among many. I'm not special.
Sure.
But it's well, actually, it's maybe more accurate than we're giving it credit for those people, because they are clowns, a lot of them. I mean, just some of the people that say it. I mean, but I don't know. It's even kind of demeaning to people. I mean, if you believe in principles and you believe in a power greater than ourselves, I mean, that power probably isn't calling you a bozo. I mean, that might be a little bit of a stretch there. So, again, I think it's another comment that people just think is kind of cool to say. It sounds good, and I'm humble, and we're all just, we're all in this together, no matter what.
I do think too, though, like, it just gets perpetuated, and thank God that I've had some sponsors along the way who were like, hey, that's not AA, or like that person says that, and like, let's find in the literature kind of where this comes from. Like, I'm very glad that I have had that experience, but a lot of people don't, and so it just continues to be used and perpetuated.
Yep.
And I think as AA members who know what AA, the program is, at least I've been trying to do a better job in a nice, kind, caring, non-judgmental way. It may not always come across that way, of just explaining like, hey, I know that you've heard this in several meetings. Here's maybe why you shouldn't say it, or maybe you want to consider not saying it anymore. Or here's where it comes from in the literature. You just want to be one among many. You know, like people will see that in the book and understand what it means, and not have to read it in some self-help book and then look up wavy gravy and be like, this is Woodstock and I don't get it.
Yeah. Well, now that we have the wavy gravy info, we're going to have to start telling people, hey, but you can't say it. It came from Woodstock.
That's right.
Yeah. Wavy gravy was
He was a clown activist. There you go. That's an
there you
outside
go.
issue. Truly, that is an outside issue.
Yeah. Well,
You want to keep it or scrap it, Graham?
Scrap it.
Jerry?
scrap.
All right, it's
Shank.
out of here. It is out of here.
All right. Well, the shrapnel has not fared well this season.
This season, it has not.
Nope. We should just stick to the book and to the steps and the traditions the way they're written. Graham, we appreciate you coming on today. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, guys. It was great to see you both again. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, we appreciate your insights and your experience. And look, we know that there's a lot with these traditions, and we're only scratching the surface. There are actually some very good there's some very good literature that AA publishes on traditions. AA Comes of Age, 12 Traditions Illustrated, the AA group pamphlet. There's a good pamphlet on anonymity that actually, I think we covered it in a previous season, called Understanding Anonymity. It has some really good information in it. So check that out, and we appreciate you listening today. And remember, be free.
Freedom.
Thanks for listening. If you have a comment, suggestion, or just need help, you can email Shank and Wayne
at freedom@alcoholicsalive.com. Remember, we're recovered members of Alcoholics Anonymous, but we do not speak for Alcoholics Anonymous, nor do we get paid. Join us next week for another great episode.